books, now she doesn't give a shit. She takes from the poor to make herself rich, and that's what makes Melanie Hines a bitch.
Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What's going on out there, peeps? Congratulations to Q Idiot. Got a slamming song, flying up the charts with the bullet. It's a catchy tune, man. It's real easy to remember. Melanie Hines taken from the poor to make herself rich. She's a scammer. Good song. It's only fitting. You guys are smothering me with questions about whether Iraq is on the SWIFT system and what does it take to get Iraq on the global FOREX. So let's go ahead and tackle these questions. Before we get started, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I certainly do appreciate it. Let's cover a little bit of the news. Iraq will become an internal and external banking force. That's what we are hoping for. That's why our fingers are crossed. For those of us who are invested into the Iraqi stock exchange, that's why we are so heavily invested into the banking sector. Said the representatives of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Hussein, confirmed on Friday that Iraq will turn into an internal and external banking force. He said in a statement that was reported by the news, Economy News that is, the word said during the money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism conference indicated that Iraq is coming to a regional and international benefit to restore its status. That's one of the big steps Iraq needs to do for the dinar to be traded on the Forex. He added that the Iraqi economy system can only be completed by an effective financial sector internally and externally, pointing out that Iraq is committed to taking positive steps to restore confidence in the financial and banking sector in Iraq. The United Nations supports the direction of Iraq, which will be in the coming days an interactive banking force internally and externally, stressing that combating terrorism is not only a scourge that has affected Iraq, but the whole world, and the sacrifices made by Iraq with self and money are not simple and few. He pointed out that these sacrifices must be completed and continue to restore Iraq's position in the financial and banking sector. This is great news because in order for Iraq to be on the SWIFT system, as well as trading on the global FOREX, these types of steps need to be taken. Here's some more good news for Iraq. I told people that when Iraq builds up their foreign reserves, it's a great way to protect them from fluctuations in the market. It protects their currency's value. Government consultant, our large foreign reserves protects Iraq from fluctuations in oil prices. Yes, it does. So Brent crude oil right now is $62.78 a barrel. Remember why this is important. When Iraq sets their budget, they set a price for Brent crude oil. So if they set it at, like, let's say $60, this is good. They're over the $60 limit. But if they set it at like 65 and it drops below, that puts Iraq in a deficit. That's what they don't want. What this article is saying is even if it does drop below, they have enough foreign reserves to protect their currency, which is awesome. Now, here we go again. So we're starting to hear, oh, Iraq is on the SWIFT system and all these rumors. They're trying to claim that the exchange rate for the IQD is $4 on the SWIFT system, which is just bullshit. You won't see no exchange rate on the SWIFT system. The SWIFT system is a messaging board. That's all it is. What they're talking about is a global FOREX. There's where you'll see exchange rate for the Iraqi dinar. But this we're talking about is trying to get the IQD on the global FOREX system. And what does Iraq need exactly to finally get trading on the global FOREX? For Iraq's dinar to trade on the global FOREX market, particularly on the SWIFT system, or more broadly, to be freely traded and gain international recognition, several steps need to be taken. The current situation is that Iraqi dinar, the IQD, is not widely traded outside of Iraq, and its value is controlled by the Central Bank of Iraq rather than being determined by the market forces. That's the difference between a fixed exchange rate and a free float. Economic stability and diversification. So most of these things you guys heard me talk about in the past, but this is more of where Iraq stands. First and foremost, Iraq needs to achieve a certain level of economic stability. This involves diversifying its economy beyond oil exports, which are the mainstay of its revenue. The reliance on oil makes the economy vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil prices. Diversification efforts could include investments in other sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, or tourism. Okay, so we know that's taking place. So they're doing what they can to be as diversified as can be. It just so happens that today the article came out that they are very well stocked in foreign reserves that can help protect the value of their currency. But we still need economic stability, and that's one of the big things that Iraq has been working on. Strengthening monetary policy and banking system. The CBI needs to implement robust monetary policies to stabilize the currency and control inflation. Right now, we know their inflation has been under control. It's been for quite a while. Strengthening the banking system through modernization, including the adoption of digital banking and stricter regulations on foreign exchange transactions, is also crucial. This would help to reduce corruption and improving the overall financial health of the country. We have been talking about them strengthening up their banking sector now for years, so they're really putting a hardcore effort into making that possible. The other thing is sanctions. I keep hearing people say there's no more sanctions. For the most part in Iraq, most of the sanctions are lifted. But you guys got to remember, they put 14 banks on restriction. They sanctioned them. Do you guys remember that? Because they were not following the rules and the regulations, and they continue to be monitored. Those 14 banks are still there under sanctions, by the way. But those 14 banks are trading on the SWIFT system, but under very strict control. In other words, they have babysitters. Once those babysitters are removed, and all the banks are following the strict instructions and regulations, that would be a huge step for Iraq. That's one of the steps Iraq can take to help the Iraqi Dinar trade freely on the Forex. Political stability and security are essential for attracting foreign investment, which is vital to economic growth and currency stability. Iraq has faced decades of conflict and political instability, which have deterred investment. Improving governance and reducing corruption are key steps in this direction. We know that al-Sunani's done a great job in trying to stabilize the economy, trying to stabilize the people, and try to stabilize the politics. He's done a wonderful job of staying away from conflicts. He just has to keep that going. Now remember, we have an election coming up in November. That's going to be a biggie. That really is going to tell us a whole lot about what direction Iraq's going in. It just really depends on who grabs control of the government. As far as foreign direct investment, we know they hold these summits all the time and open up the doors for people to invest in Iraq, and they've got a lot of memorandums of understanding, which is a benefit for Iraq. It still needs to continue to grow. And getting away from relying on oil so much, we saw some growth in that area. We saw the percentage move from 96% reliant on oil sales in order to fund their government. I just saw it the other day, 92%. That's a huge drop in reliance on oil. But they still got to continue, because any major shift in the oil prices could really screw Iraq big time. International cooperation and IMF involvement. Continued cooperation with the international financial institutions like the IMF can provide Iraq with the necessary guidance and support to implement economic reforms. The IMF's recommendations often focus on financial stability, anti-corruption measures, and fiscal responsibilities, which we know IMF and Iraq have been working closely together, strengthening their banking sectors. So this is already happening. Now, this is interesting that this is on the list. Redenomination versus revaluation. It is also important to distinguish between redenomination and revaluation. A redenomination involves changing the face value of banknotes, removing the zeros without affecting their purchasing price. In other words, change the way the banknotes look. When they delete the zeros, it's not changing the exchange rate, despite what idiots might tell you out there. Revaluation, on the other hand, involves increasing the value of a currency relative to others, usually driven by economic growth or government decisions. Iraq has considered redenomination to simplify transactions, but this does not directly impact the currency value against other currencies, like the US dollar. That's what I was explaining here. See, when they drop the zeros, your 25,000 dinar with the current exchange rate, 0.0076 equals $19. See this? This is your purchasing power. Here, when they remove the zeros, your 25,000 dinar now becomes 25. Take the 3 zeros here off and it becomes 0.76. 25 times 76, the purchasing power remains at $19. So yes, it's coming off the banknote. That's why it's important that you listen to people that know what they're talking about, know the ass from a hole in the ground, instead of people who are trying to scam you out of their money, claiming that they're talking to God, but God hasn't explained this to her. So it looks like Iraq intends to redenominate before they go active on the global Forex. As far as the SWIFT system is concerned, Iraq is already on the SWIFT system. As a matter of fact, some of their banks actively work on the SWIFT system. There are some banks who are still under restrictions and are not on the SWIFT system. The SWIFT system is something totally different than the Forex. The Forex is when we get to watch the value of the Iraqi dinar go up or down once it's actively trading back on the Forex. Steps towards freely traded currency. To have its currency freely traded on global markets, it must improve economic fundamentals, enhance economic stability through diversification. And they have been working very hard on that, and in my opinion, they are definitely on the right track. Strengthen financial systems, modernize banking, and enforce strict financial regulations, which we know they're working on right now and have been for the past couple of years. Ensure political stability, foster a stable political environment conducive to investment. While they haven't been involved in any conflicts lately, and although they tend to do a lot of infighting, stability for the most part looks pretty good in Iraq. Engage with international financial institutions. Continue working with the bodies like the IMF to guide economic reforms. And we know that the Federal Reserve in the United States has been working closely with Iraq to get this accomplished. So by achieving these milestones, Iraq can potentially increase the attractiveness of its currency to international investors and pave the way for it to be traded more freely on the global Forex market. Now that's why I think they're going to redenominate and take the zeros off. Because the zeros remind everybody of a devalued currency. Taking the zeros off will make the currency look like normal currencies and give people the confidence that they need to invest in the currency. So overall, the key steps Iraq needs to take are improving economic fundamentals through diversification, strengthening its financial systems, ensuring political stability, and engaging in international financial institutions, in which we read about almost every day in the news when it's pertaining to Iraq. So Iraq is well on their way of accomplishing what they need to accomplish to get the Iraqi dinar back on the global Forex, which is important. We need to get those restrictions off those banks so they can start using the SWIFT system more freely without babysitters, because that's going to help the Iraqi dinar get back on the global Forex, which is what everybody is waiting for. Anyways, go ahead and leave a comment down below and I'll get back at you later. I'm out.